What's the real difference between just a good idea and an idea that actually changes the world? Well, it turns out it's often not what we've been led to believe. Today, we're going to dive into Adam Grant's amazing book, Originals, to uncover the surprising and, let's be honest, kind of weird habits of the people who really shake things up. This quote from George Bernard Shaw, it absolutely nails it. See, Adam Grant argues that originals aren't just going with the flow. They're the ones pushing back, trying to reshape the world to fit their vision. And that's what we're exploring here, how to tap into that unreasonable mindset. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through 5 key habits that are basically a playbook for original thinking. We'll start with how originals see the world, then cover how they manage risk, how they come up with ideas, how they use time, and finally, how they actually get their ideas heard. All right, let's get into the first and maybe the most important habit of all, rejecting the default. This is all about learning to see the things everyone else takes for granted. So, what do we even mean by originality? It's not just about being different for the sake of being different. Grant makes a really key distinction. It's about coming up with unusual ideas that actually improve the way things already work. It's innovation with a real purpose. Warby Parker is the perfect example of this. For decades, the default was simple. Eyeglasses are expensive. That's just how it is. But then a few students stopped and asked, wait, why? Just by questioning that single assumption, that one default setting, they ended up building a company that completely upended the entire industry. That's the power we're talking about. And that brings up a really big question for you to think about. What are the defaults that you just accept every single day? The clunky processes at your job or the assumptions in your own life that you've just never really stopped to question. Just spotting them? That's the very first step. Okay, so once you start questioning things, how do you act on it? This is where we run smack into one of the biggest myths about innovators, this idea that they're all just reckless daredevils. Right, we have this image in our heads of the entrepreneur who dramatically quits their job, bets their life savings, and goes all in on some wild idea. But the research Grant shares? It shows the exact opposite. Real, successful originals are much more like careful investors. They don't put all their chips on one risky bet. They balance a whole portfolio of risk. Think of it like having a safety net. It's actually a huge deal. For instance, Bill Gates didn't just drop out of Harvard on a whim. He waited until he knew Microsoft had a paying customer. And the Warby Parker guys, they kept their other commitments going while they were building the company. The lesson here is pretty clear. Having that stability in one area of your life gives you the freedom you need to be truly original and take smart risks somewhere else. Okay, so you're questioning the status quo, you've got your risk portfolio balanced. Now, where do the actual great ideas come from? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. Here's the hard truth. Pretty much everyone, even the experts, are terrible at predicting which ideas will be a hit. I mean, the Segway was hyped up by people like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos as this revolutionary invention, and it was a total flop. Meanwhile, Seinfeld was laughed out of the room by executives, a show about nothing, they said, and it became one of the biggest shows of all time. So what does that tell you? Nobody really knows what's going to work. So if you can't predict success, what can you do? It's simple. Generate more ideas. A lot more. We all remember Picasso for a few iconic masterpieces, right? But the man produced thousands and thousands of works. And you see this pattern over and over with the most creative people in history. The quality, it comes directly from the quantity. This old saying pretty much sums it all up. Your chances of stumbling upon a truly brilliant idea are directly linked to how many ideas you come up with in the first place. You've got to be okay with generating a whole lot of frogs to find that one prince. All right, our next habit is going to sound like it goes against everything you've ever heard about productivity, because today we are going to make a serious case for procrastination. Now, hold on. To be super clear, this is not about being lazy. This is about strategic delay. It's when you start a task, but then you purposefully step away from it. This lets your mind chew on the problem in the background. It's called divergent thinking. It's why Martin Luther King Jr. was still writing parts of his I Have a Dream speech the night before he gave it. That last-minute pressure allowed for that legendary improvised moment. It's why Leonardo da Vinci would let his paintings sit for years at a time. He was giving the idea space to incubate. And this idea doesn't just apply to art or speeches. It's huge in business, too. We've all heard about first mover advantage, right? Rush in, be the first. But the data? Well, it tells a very different story. The pioneers? The ones who are first to market have a staggering 47% failure rate. But the settlers, the ones who hang back, watch the pioneers make all the mistakes, and then come in with an improved version, their failure rate is just 8%. Sometimes it literally pays to wait. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, which is often the hardest part. Because having a brilliant idea, well, that's not enough. You have to convince other people to get on board. And that is a skill all its own. Let me tell you about Carmen Medina. She was an analyst at the CIA, and she had this incredible idea to create a collaborative platform for intelligence sharing, kind of like Wikipedia. Her first attempt to get it off the ground, it failed miserably. They shut her down completely. But years later, she tried again, and this time it worked. So what changed? Well, here's the playbook she used the second time. First, she earned status. Over the years, she built up so much credibility that when she spoke, people had to listen, even if they didn't like what she was saying. Second, when she presented her idea again, she led with its flaws. She pointed out the weaknesses herself, which disarmed all the critics and instantly built trust. And finally, she made the unfamiliar feel familiar. She explained her new, weird idea by comparing it to things her colleagues already knew and understood. So, let's bring this all home. How do we pull all these pieces together? Let's do a quick recap of the core habits that can help any of us become just a little more unreasonable and a lot more original. Here it is, your basic playbook. First, start looking for those default settings in your own life and ask why. Second, be an investor, not a daredevil. Build a safety net so you can afford to take smart risks. Third, to get to a great idea, you have to generate tons of ideas. Remember, quantity first. Fourth, use strategic procrastination to let your best ideas develop. And finally, when you're ready to share your vision, play it smart. Build your credibility, be upfront about the flaws, and make the new feel familiar. And that brings us right back to where we started. All progress depends on that unreasonable person. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. What's one unreasonable idea you've been sitting on that if you actually went for it, just might change everything?